wanted to do this message series for some time, and it's going to be several weeks. It really is because the reason I'm doing it is because it is personal to me that a lot of people have a lot of problem with the resurrection, and I did personally. To give you a little background, when I first was challenged with becoming a believer, I was at this place. I thought that people who needed the Lord or had the Lord or wanted to know God or had God were people with a understanding of a fig Newton of an imagination in their brain about this guy, and they needed a crutch, and that's how they were getting through life. And if that was cool, if that's what their thing is, that's what they need, that's fine. Leave me alone. I did believe that something made everything. I wasn't that bad, but something must have made everything. But this supposed God, I'm just being straight honest with you. I figured he must be a sickie. Because if he wasn't, why are all these wars? Why are all these people sick? Why are there people in wheelchairs from the beginning of their life? Why is crime so rampant? And even the people who were good, the religious guys, the ones who were the holy rollers in my eyes, they were sick. They had the same kind of problems. They might have had a better attitude about it, but they had the same garbage going on in their life. And I thought to myself, if there's really an all-powerful God, he could erase all this. He could stop all this. Better yet, he shouldn't stop it. He shouldn't even be happening. So I don't want to believe in this guy. He's such a loving God. Look what he's doing. That's where I was. And then one day, on the way to the forum, if that went over your head, it's because you're not old. One day I met some people, and I'll just make a very long story short. I accepted this God of theirs, and after becoming a believer immediately and intensely, my wife Jackie and I became extremely persecuted. Persecuted by our Jewish family, our Jewish friends, Christians who told us we're not Jewish anymore, etc., etc. It was intense. My aunt sent us to, my aunt who was my godmother, my mother had died many years before, sent us to a deprogrammer, and that was fun. But there was a reason that I kept going, is that not only did he enter my heart, and we were putting up with all this, but I was in a place where the reason that I agreed to the deprogrammer was I didn't want to be believing a lie. And I didn't really know anything. I was only a few weeks of a believer, and she sicked this guy on us, and he was after us. So I started on a very detailed search, big time, in and out of the Bible to answer people's valid questions, because there are valid questions. Which led me to write the book that you probably all know about. I have a friend who's Jewish, do you? And I will say, it only took you 5 years to read it. Hello. Been here since we opened. I will say that over the years, it became apparent in the book, in my walk with people, that I didn't really have a really good answer to one question in particular, which was, I didn't have an answer other than faith. And when you don't believe, you don't have faith, so then you don't believe, It's like you can listen to somebody, but if they don't have faith, it ain't happening. So there's got to be, to my mind, there needed to be an answer. And the answer was, my objection and theirs, was you want me to say in order to become a believer that I believe that Yeshua, Jesus, rose from the dead. How am I supposed to know that? I had a problem with that. How am I supposed to know that? Like, really? Just because you said so or it's written in a book? How am I supposed to know that? How can that be verified? A few years ago, Jim Jacobs, that's his pen name, I'm not able to give you his real name, who is a highly respected lawyer. He's not using his real name because he wants to make Aliyah to Israel, and they won't exactly like him coming there. Okay. He wrote a book called A Lawyer's Case for the Resurrection. If you've never read this book, you can save $2 and listen to me for the next few weeks, because that's what this is going to be about. It's coming from the foundations coming out of this book. You can also, if you want to purchase it, and if you're watching online, it's not $2. It's at onemessiah.org, which is our website, and it's in the store. Okay, so it can be purchased there. So this teaching over the next few weeks is based on this book, and because he's a lawyer, he presents everything as a trial. It's done, the entire book is a trial, where there's the prosecutor, and there's the witnesses, and you, all of you and everyone out there on the internet get to be the jury. And you get to review all the evidence that's presented for the life, the death, and the resurrection of Yeshua, of Jesus. And then you get to render your verdict. So, good, interesting thing about the book, and believe me, I'm not going to do the whole thing. I'm going to do the whole book, but not in the detail that he goes into here, or we'd be here for quite a while, is discussing first, from a legal point of view, how historians actually prove something like Christopher Columbus. How do you prove Christopher Columbus? Because you sang about it in elementary school? There were no witnesses that you can talk to, so your trial is a little difficult. There's no video footage. There's no witnesses. Chris ain't around anymore to ask him what happened. And none of his crew is here. So how do historians verify or prove something that we weren't around for? Well, let's just start with, there's rarely a single piece of evidence in any trial that conclusively corroborates the specific event or events of any individual in ancient history, or even not so ancient history. It's rarely available. But history is sort of like a puzzle. It's a whole bunch of pieces that need to be assembled. Some of them are writings that have been done at the time. Some of them are logic. Some of them are archaeological. But they're all based on a theory, because there's nobody here. So we have to use the puzzle pieces and put them together. Witnesses are scrutinized, as in a courtroom, with their respect to their motive to lie. That happens, right? And if an agenda is available, which it is all the time to everyone, then there's a possibility that people in the time lied. So is their testimony consistent or inconsistent with the other puzzle pieces that are known? Does this all make sense so far? Okay? But the historians and myself need to tell you that no matter how conclusive the evidence is, No one can be 100% sure. Yes? Does that seem fair? Especially something that happened a couple thousand years ago. Well, there's four historical, that's the word, in history, accounts of the life of Yeshua in the Bible. They are some of the most useful pieces of evidence in determining his authenticity. The books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Why are they important? Because they were with him and they wrote about him in the time that he was alive. Of course, they're known as the Gospels. They're the first four books of the New Covenant. But there's a debate, legitimately, but not fairly, whether the Gospels can be used to prove Yeshua Jesus because they're in the Bible. So that sort of throws them out, which is stupid because they are writings from the time. So let's review two of the common objections that people have against the validity of these historical writings in the New Covenant or the New Testament. The majority of historians agree that the Gospels were written. This is very important what I'm going to say right now. That the Gospels were written during the time of Yeshua, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of witnesses were there to see his ministry, his life, his death, his resurrection. They were still alive. Here's the point. If all of these things weren't true, they were alive to refute it, to say, no, that didn't happen. Now, understanding the day and the age, things like writing things down. There were no photocopiers, computers, typewriters. There was guys called scribes, okay? And they hand wrote, just like the Torah, they hand wrote. Paper was not cheap. Nothing was easy. And they wrote these things down. How careful were they? Some of you have heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered 900 years after the previous writings of the Bible. Okay, do you understand what I'm saying? In other words, the writings of the Bible, the last ones that were found, and then 900 years went by, and then the Dead Sea Scrolls are found. And it's pieces of the Bible. And what they found was 900 years later, the scribes were so careful in their copying letter by letter by letter that the Dead Sea Scrolls were virtually 100% exactly the same, virtually 100% as 900 years earlier. So these scribes were pretty careful in what they did. Is that important in a trial? Yep. Absolutely. Historians actually estimate that the four gospel writings are 99.5% sure that they are accurate, written accurately, and these historians are not Bible believers necessarily. Do you think the Bible has been scrutinized above and beyond all other books? Why? Outrageous claims? Because Satan doesn't want it to be known nor believed. So these four Gospels have literally, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they have been scrutinized way beyond any other document. In the book, he goes into really good detail about that, but I don't want to take the time. The one thing that's been true is the more discoveries that are made, the more accurate the Bible becomes. and that's a good thing. Most of the historical documents that are used for proofs of things in the past are second and third hand witnesses, many times hundreds of years later. So to ignore 4 writings that were in the time frame of basically the scholars believe the latest was they were written 35 to 70 years after the death of Yeshua. There were so many people still alive, but the people who wrote them were there. And that's very important. So let's begin the testimony here with a question. Did Yeshua live and die in Israel 2,000 years ago? That's the beginning question. One of the best, most important ways of determining the validity of a historical event is the examination of a person who is usually called a hostile witness. Now, you hear that term on different shows. Bottom line, what's a hostile witness? It's someone who is, well, let me give you an example rather than explain it. A person is murdered. The person is murdered, and that day they had a horrible fight, and the person they had a fight with threatened to kill them. So this person who threatened to kill them goes home and is in a rage. And the mother of this person sees this, hears this person ranting and raving how he's going to kill this person, and leaves the house with a gun. So the prosecution calls up the mother. She's considered a hostile witness. Do you understand? Why is she a hostile witness? It's Mama. Mama's going to lie for the boy. You understand? But she says, literally, she says, my son left that day with a gun and was telling me he was going to kill him. Does everybody understand the point? Any testimony from a hostile witness is considered highly persuasive because the mother wouldn't normally do that. Do you understand? Whose benefit is her testimony to? The defense? The truth? See, you need to really understand that people who have not only no reason to lie, but have a reason, let me say that differently. People who have an agenda, therefore, would normally either lie or not say things that need to be said. When they get up in a courtroom and they say things that are detrimental, that's a pretty strong witness that this guy did something. Would you agree? Do you understand what I'm saying? Anybody lost? So let's take Josephus, Flavius Josephus. Some of you know who he is. He was a Jew. He was a Jew of Jew. He is one of the most well-known. He wrote a book like this thick. Okay, I'm talking serious. He was a Roman historian, a Jewish Roman historian. He was born into a highly respected Jewish family. He was a priest in Judaism. A few years after the crucifixion of Yeshua, he wrote this in the Antiquities of the Jews. That's the name of the book. He wrote that Jesus lived, Yeshua lived. He was a doer of startling deeds and was executed on a cross. Why would a Jewish person who hated him write that truth if it was false? Do you understand? He would be considered a hostile witness. This is what he wrote. At that time there appeared Jesus, a wise man, for he was a doer of startling deeds, a teacher of people who received the truth with pleasure. And he gained a following both among many Jews and among many of Greek origin. And when Pilate, because of an accusation made by leading men among us, the Jews, condemned him to the cross, those who had loved him previously did not cease to do so. And up until this very day, the tribe of Christians named after him has not died out. So what motive did Josephus, a Jewish man writing for the Romans, what motive did he have to fabricate the existence? Any? No, it's quite the opposite. A second source affirming the life and death of Yeshua comes from the Jewish Babylonian Talmud. The Talmud in today's world, especially, is by many of the Orthodox Jews considered of higher authority than the Bible itself. It is basically commentary on the Bible, and then the next generation of rabbis commented on the commentary, and the next generation commented on the commentary, and that's why there's rooms full of these books called the Talmud. And in the Talmud, by one of the guys way, way back, I'll go into that in a bit, it's written about, again, it's written about that the rabbis themselves testified to the account of Yeshua being crucified. They called him Yeshu, which is a derogatory term. If you go to Israel, you'll hear that term from the non-believing Jews. Oh, Yeshu. And that's how they are not nice. The Babylonian Talmud states this word by word. On the eve of the Passover, they hanged Yeshu, and an announcer went out in front of him for 40 days saying, he is going to be stoned because he practiced sorcery and enticed and led Israel astray. Anyone who knows anything in his favor, let him come and plead on his behalf. But, not having found anything in his favor, they hanged him on the eve of Passover. Now, back in that day, hanged meant crucified. Remember the time, remember where they were. So the rabbis who detested him wrote in the Talmud that he was crucified on the eve of Passover. Is that testimony that he existed? Is it an adverse witness? Yes, absolutely, because they would never do that. These rabbis believed that Yeshua was blaspheming against God. There is no motive for the prominent rabbis to record in the Talmud of all places this depiction of the life and death of Yeshua on the eve of Passover. Why would they record this if it wasn't true? Say it louder, Rich.
They had to record it because it was part of their nature. They were trained their whole lives to record important things.
For those on the internet who didn't hear him, they had to record it because it's in their nature. They were recording things, and it was put in the Talmud and became a historical record from an extreme adverse witness group. Let me close with this. Rambam Maimonides, a 12th century rabbi and scholar, wrote a 14-volume book called the Mishnah Torah, or a volume in the works. He made multiple references. This is a high-level scholarly rabbi, made multiple references to Yeshua and his execution. He wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, who aspired to be the Messiah and was executed by the court. Again, an adverse witness. We have a lot to go. That was just the beginning.